Hey guys, this is Arpan from Cloudmandu, and today we're going to be talking about the top 10 mistakes that developers make and how to avoid them. The mistakes on this list are in no particular order, so without further ado, let's hop into it. Number 1 on this list is not reading documentation. This is a mistake I see beginners making, and if you don't read docs, you won't really grasp things as easily and you will have trouble fixing bugs and errors. For example, let's say that you're learning a new framework or a language and you run into a bug that can be easily fixed if you read the docs, and you try to debug this error on your own without knowing too much. This will result in you wasting a lot of time. If you had just read the docs first, you will be much better off and save much more time. The docs provide everything you need to know to get rolling, and you'll run into less errors. I've been in this situation before, and from my personal experience, reading the docs made things much easier, so if you don't read documentation, please start now. The second mistake that developers make is not commenting their code. So let's say that you're working on a project and you have not commented the code a single bit. Now, you may understand everything going on in the code, but if someone were to take a look at your code, they wouldn't have much of a clue on what's actually happening. When you comment your code, people can read the comment and understand which block of code does what. And another reason as to why you should comment your code, let's say that you're returning to a project after a month or two. Now, if you did not comment your code, you'll have a hard time reading it since it was from a while ago. But if you did comment your code, you'll easily understand your code as well as the other people reading it. So moral of the story is that you should start to comment your code so that it can benefit you as well as anyone else that's reading it. Number 3 is not building projects. Another mistake I see people doing is not building projects. If you don't build projects, there's no real way to know how much experience you have, and you won't be as confident when it comes to building things on a real job. Building projects can help out a lot. If you build projects, you can create a portfolio for yourself so that people can notice you. It's easier to get a programming job, and more. Another reason is that building projects helps you gain more experience using certain tools and frameworks. It also shows you how to problem solve and research a bit better. If you have not built any projects, please start now. I promise you that once you start building projects, you'll enjoy programming and you'll learn many things along the way. Number 4 on this list is learning too many languages at once. This is a mistake that many beginners make. Now, when you try to learn multiple languages at once, you'll mix up the syntax and get confused. This leads to more errors than expected. It is also much more difficult to learn the fundamentals of a language when you are learning more than one at a time, especially if you're learning to program for the first time. So if you're learning multiple languages at once, stick to one, and once you master the fundamentals and build projects, you can move on to another one. This will help you be much better off as a programmer, and once you learn the fundamentals and learn at least one language, it's not as difficult to learn another one. So the best advice here is to learn one language at a time. Number 5 on this list is watching too many tutorials. Now, tutorials are a great way to learn things, but you shouldn't always rely on them for everything. Yes, of course, tutorials are helpful and I make them myself, but I'd only recommend watching tutorials if you're a complete beginner or you're just starting to learn a new language or framework. Once you learn the fundamentals and basics of whatever you're trying to learn, you should be able to build projects and do your own research. But if you rely on tutorials for everything you build, you won't really grasp the information that the tutorials are teaching. Once you learn the basics, you'll have a good grasp of the basics, but when you start building things yourself, you'll actually know what's going on in the code. So the best advice here is to not rely on tutorials for everything and also try to do things yourself as well. Number 6 on this list is not practicing what you learn. This is a very bad mistake. For example, let's say that you learned a new language. Now, if you don't practice what you learned about that language, you'll eventually fall behind and forget how to use it. If you practice that language, you'll benefit from doing so. If you practice, that's another language you can add to your portfolio. You'll be able to build projects which strengthens your portfolio, and this will unlock many job opportunities. If you don't practice, your portfolio will be weaker, you won't feel confident programming in that language, and you may not have enough skills to get a job with that programming language. So best advice here is to practice what you learn, since that can benefit you in the future, especially if you're a beginner. Number 7 on this list is not including a Readme file in your GitHub repository. Now, this is not as crucial as the other mistakes, but it's still important to include a Readme file. Basically, a Readme file lets people know what your project is about. A Readme file includes the tools used to build it, how to run the app, and some additional information. If you want people to test your project or app, be sure to put a Readme file. If you don't put a Readme file, it will be confusing for people to run and test your apps. If you're having a hard time creating one, or if the format is confusing, you can go to makeareadme.com where you can enter in information about your app and it will generate a Readme file for you. Number 8 on this list is trying to implement something without planning it out. Now, this is a mistake I see some people making, and I have also made this mistake in the past. When you try to implement something without planning it, it will usually take a longer time and you will run into more errors. but if you plan things out properly before coding, you will likely run into less errors, it won't be too difficult to implement, and you'll be a better problem solver. For example, you can make a list of things you need to do in order to implement a new feature, you can create a diagram, or create a design doc. Number 9 on this list is not learning data structures and algorithms. Data structures and algorithms are very important. If you've just finished learning a programming language and you can build some projects, I definitely recommend learning data structures and algorithms. This part may be very stressful, but if you learn them in practice, you'll have a much better chance at getting a job at a good company. The interview questions at larger companies are questions that require knowledge of data structures and algorithms. In my opinion, I recommend learning them as soon as you are comfortable with a programming language, and another benefit is that learning data structures and algorithms can help you create much better software and faster apps. Number 10 on this list is sticking to only one technology. This can be a framework, a language, etc. Now, this is a bad mistake and some people make it. And in tech, there are constant changes and improvements being made, and as a developer, you have to stay up to date. For example, let's say that you only learned one programming language, and if you only learned one, you'll be limited to the things that the language provides. You wouldn't be able to branch out into other technologies. If you learn more technologies, you'll gain more skill, you'll be able to add that to your portfolio, and you'll be able to branch out into other technologies and build different types of software. This diversifies your portfolio, and you'll end up being a better developer overall. Alright guys, that's it for this video. If you made any of these mistakes, please try to avoid them so you'll end up being a better developer. And to find your next career opportunity, visit cloudmadu.com. With that being said, see you next time.